You're going to the facility whether you want to or not." He stood by the dining room window, arms crossed, as if waiting for me to break down in tears or drop to my knees and plead. But I didn't. I didn't move or say a word. I just watched him, wondering silently if this was truly the son I had raised, the one I nursed with broken, tender breasts, the one who clung to my robe during nightmares. How does blood turn so cold? I didn't answer, not because I lacked the words, but because if I opened my mouth, my very soul would spill out. He scoffed, annoyed by my silence, and said he couldn't keep supporting me anymore, that I was complicating his life, that his wife was tired, that this wasn't a life for anyone, as if I were a burden, an overdue bill, an old box cluttering the living room. He said it all without raising his voice, with that calm that hurts worse than a scream. I could only think, what did I do to deserve this? But neither he nor anyone else knows what a mother keeps quiet. I walked to the kitchen as if nothing were wrong. I boiled water and brewed coffee. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the immense strength it took not to cry. I sat at the table and sipped slowly. From the next room, I heard him on the phone, saying the assisted living facility had an opening, that he'd take care of everything, that it would be resolved in 2 days. 2 days, that's how little I'm worth. I clenched the mug's rim, remembering the years, the good, the bad, the times I ate less so he could eat more, the nights I stayed awake tending his asthma, his fears, his shadows, all of it now reduced to a decision made without my voice. I knew this day was coming, not exactly like this, but I'd felt it in how Marcus looked at me for months, as if my breathing bothered him, in the silent meals, the slammed doors, the way his wife treated me like an overstayed guest. But that phrase was the final blow. When he returned to the kitchen, I had finished my coffee. I asked quietly if he wanted dinner. He looked confused. Maybe he expected screams or begging, but I wasn't that woman anymore. I went to my room, closed the door carefully, and in that moment, as night began, I decided, if anyone makes decisions about my life, it'll be me. Marcus doesn't know who I am, who I was, or what it cost to get here. He forgets I had a life before motherhood that I dreamed, danced in the rain, loved wildly, had my heart broken, started over, and built everything he now wants to take. He forgets this house is mine. I worked 30 years managing a local bakery, 6 days a week, sleeping 4 hours a night, to pay for every brick, window, and flower. I never asked for thanks, but memory is selective when convenient. I didn't sleep that night, staring at the ceiling, recalling every detail. The dirt lot that became this home, bringing newborn Marcus here in a yellow blanket, Christmases, laughter, fights, makeups all stored in these walls. Now he wanted to institutionalize me like a prisoner. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because I wouldn't give him my tears. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual. Marcus came down with his haste and distance, said he'd handle paperwork and talk later. I nodded. When he left, I went to the closet, not for clothes, but for a dark wooden box with my documents, deeds, will, hidden savings, letters, photos, not much, but enough. I sat with it on my lap and smiled for the first time in ages. He thinks I'm weak, but he has no idea what I've endured or what I'm capable of. I closed the box and put it back. I had to act calm, intelligent. The game had started, and I'd moved the pieces. That night, I pretended tiredness and went to bed early. From my room, I heard him tell his wife the place was nice, with a garden, like a resort is, if shelving a mother. I pulled the blanket up, not against cold, but contempt, leaving no longer hurt. What hurt was them deciding without me, but they'd soon understand. The next week would change everything, and I'd have the final word. I remember Marcus's birth, like the sky knew something big was coming. The doctor said he took a deep breath from the first second, demanding the world with his cry. I thought it meant strength, life. I never imagined it was a warning. From childhood, Marcus was demanding, not crying from hunger, but whim. I, with blind first mother love, pleased him. Extra hours at my alterations business for designer sneakers. Debt for private school to keep him from bad influences. I swallowed tears and sleepless nights for his sake. When his father, Robert, died, Marcus was 15. It hit us hard, but what hurt most was how he looked at me like I knew nothing, like he was the man of the house, and I, a shadow. Don't cry so much, Mom. He had to die of something, he said while I clutched Robert's pillow. Things changed. No consultations, outings without word, treating me like a housekeeper, burden, annoyance. I justified lessons, grief, and kept cooking favorites, washing clothes, hoping for hugs that never returned. Years passed. Marcus became a successful executive, moved out. I stayed in the house Robert and I built brick by brick. I thought he'd visit, share coffee, care, but calls faded, visits rushed. What hurt wasn't coldness, but how he eyed the house like measuring inheritance. One day, Mom, think about selling. It's old. You can't maintain it, said without eye contact. Ignoring it was my last piece of Robert, our history, myself. I nodded silently, poured more coffee. Pressure built. Weekly calls about notaries, investors. It's for your own good. Each hung up, peeled me away. I clung to routines, plants, sewing, walks, but his ambition shadowed every corner. Then he arrived in his new car, suit, cologne, hard face. I've spoken to Attorney Sterling. If you don't sign, I'll take other measures. This house is mine whether you like it or not. Something broke not in me, but him. I didn't cry or upset. I watched. In that silence, he saw he had no power. That night, I reviewed my ledger, education costs, house investments, sacrifices, every number a wound, betrayal. I realized, my son doesn't love me. He needs me dead to inherit. I decided, he'd get nothing, not a wall, chair, flower pot. Next morning, I walked streets with new eyes, saw a retired notary, Ms. Evelyn Reed, still doing estate work. She agreed. I gathered deeds, receipts, Robert's letter stating the house mine unconditionally. Weeks passed. Marcus silent. Better I kept quiet, rebellion in silence. A month later, he returned, arrogant. I've decided, you're going to the facility whether you want to or not. Not just ambition, contempt. Final straw. That afternoon, contempt thick, plates left uncleared, rising tone, avoided eyes. At dinner, he said calmly, cutting meat, spoke to Mr. Dawson. House in my name. You're going. I placed my napkin, silent, deciding, didn't sleep, paced shadows. Questions no longer enough. Started writing dates, names, facts, remembered, deed mine. No signatures. If he thought I'd hand it over, he didn't know me. Began small. Sold inherited silverware, stored jewelry, all silent. Marcus saw submissive woman. No more. Day before attorney visit, overheard, all set. Old lady doesn't say anything, cooks ghosts around, sign in weak, gut kitchen, old lady, not mom, instant, no time waste. Protect myself. Next day, new bank account, precautions, passwords changed, documents copied, reread, deed clause nulling, changes under coercion, abuse, guarded like gold. Humiliations continued, ignored, forceful bags, orders, cutting stairs, made his favorite smothered pork chops, rice hoping memory. He tasted bland, like you. Indifference worse than anger. Decided, can't alone. Thought of Serena Hayes, kind neighbor who cared for her mother, offered help, went to her, need talk. No one else. She let me in. Kitchen breath, poured everything, words, blows, silences, contempt. She listened, took hand, not alone. Don't give life to who doesn't value. Shifted, returned, different, straighter back. Marcus noticed, narrowed eyes, silent. Serena visited, bread, patio sits. Few words, relief, afternoon coffee. If leave, I'll help anywhere. Just say watched steam. Ignited. First, felt restart. Night, opened drawer. Deed Thelma Price. Mine, gathered to disappear. Documents, money, birth certificate, gold chain, hid in cookie tin, underdresser, false bottom. Played part, set table, cooked. Marcus, distracted calls, plans, renovations, but checked. Entered room, excuses, eyes sweeping, watched. I memorized, photographed things. Serena, cousin, near Asheville, quiet. Start there, silent, promise, hop, I'll drive, plan. Friday, Marcus at Sterling meeting, slip out back, suitcase, meet corner, precise, fast, goal, leave house intact, clean empty inheritance, sold valuables unnoticed, porcelain, folk art, painting, sales, goodbyes, sadness, liberation, money, in purse, lining. Enough, live independent. Days passed. Marcus nervous, bin bank, denied, feels strange, sure not signing. Irony, lied, don't handle anymore. 2 days before, accident, receipt fell. Marcus entered, grabbed antique sale. What, old, nothing. Watched eternity. Left, didn't sleep home. Serena called, moving up, can't risk. Day before, packed suitcase, left letter under vase, no fond farewell. House not yours, no sign, destroyed, can't fix. Understand, Mother's presence worth more than money. Signed, Thelma Price. Serena arrived. No cry. Closed door firm. No look back. Sky clouds. Felt sun. Drove silent. Rode long. Didn't care not returning. Monster raised. Learn without me. Car on back road. Trees swaying. Silence crowded. Unsaid phrases. Choked cries. Serena's understanding weight left. Marcus returned. Parked. Entered. Talking phone. Sharp deals. Poured water. Kicked shoes. Armchair. Hit different silence. Heavier void. Call name. Nothing. Upstairs. Empty bedroom. Soul gone. Down. Saw Letta. Read. Furrowed. Rage. Disbelief. Abandonment. Look. Tore. Through. Kicked vase. Shattered. No. Right. Screamed nothing. Checked closets. Drawers. Missing. Jewelry. Papers. Deeds. Money. Fear. Not property. Control. Called phone. Unavailable. Contacts. Nothing. Serena. No answer. Breakdown. Wandered. Furious ghost. Rewrote letter rage. Told self. Tantrum. Return. But nights alone. Self-made coffee. Unaround. Shirt certainty. Not back. Investigated. Bank withdrawals unnoticed. Thought clumsy. Wrong. Dawson requested deed copy. Still hers. Can't sell without signature. Underestimated. Neighbors. Silent. Serena's knock. Gone. Drank. Silent. Food. Flavorless days. Purposeless. Abyss. House not trophy. Reminded. No wash. Cook. Sleep without me. Morning. Dust. Empty fridge. Stale. Bath cried. Low. Shameful. Real revenge. Absence. Endured contempt as jokes. Orders as advice. Cold as care. Abandoned wait. Executioner couldn't force return. Arrived town entrance. Orange sky. Quiet. Silent enough breathe. Serena off car. Let time. Outleg sugar bell. Crossed threshold small house. No luxuries. Ghosts. Air old wood. Clean. Sat chair. Laughed hysterical. Here, she said. Yes. Didn't sleep. Body unused silence. No footsteps. Messages. Stairs night. Me. Free insomnia. Days clumsy. Healing time. Market. Looked danger. Hard smile forgotten inside. Serena patient. Accompanied space. Cooked. Read silent while I stared. Humming song. Watering pots. Mine. Not happiness present. In life. Dark. Nightmares. Marcus yelling. Shattered plates. Silent days. Burdened. Needles. Skin. Woke. Serena tea. Or silence. Aloud broken no problem. Afternoon alone. Look out. Climbed slow. Felt muscles. Breath top. Different eyes. Chose. Disappear unloved. No regret. Thoughts. Sell house. Travel. Live peace. Serena give years. Denied. Mind. Wind. Exactly where need. Not revenge. Justice. Marcus learn. Mother not eternal. Can't stomp heart. Expect beat. Beat for me. Marcus felt house. Not his. Pretended. Temporary. Overreacting. Return. But silence multiplied. Kitchen cold. No coffee. Windows closed. Dust settled. House without me. Inhospitable. Saw me furniture extension. Willis server. Didn't understand. Soul me. Took when left. Serena watched reorder. Little Marcus talk. New tract. Bank notary. Cousin invisible dignity. Market. Bought ivy. Placed window. Talked. Fine hair. Me too. Dreamed Marcus child. Crying empty room. Broken toys. Why left? Woke. Guilt. Liberation. Left alone years. News. No work. Locked. Bad-tempered. Yelling mentions. Drinking. Asleep couch bottles. TV cooking show I watched. Arrogance crumbled. No blame. Humiliate had inhabit self. Didn't know. Handwritten letter. No return. Recognized. Clumsy apology. Manipulation. Don't understand. Could talk. Suffering. No mistreated. Invalidated. Hurt. Tore. Burned. No need approval. Forgiveness. No power. House sale progressed. Agent asked. Sure valuable. Rent. Return. Image. Hunched. Marcus yelling. Breaking. Nobody free. Wound roof. Signed. Money new account. Serena held hand. No by house live Italy. Maybe dance. Swim. Laugh. No permission. Marcus knew. Crazy. Tried. Stop empty. Painted. New owners. Yeah. Shouted name. Angry child. Called. Changed number. Undelivered emails. Searched. Ghost took air. Serena special dinner. Shrimp grits. Bread. Wine. Toasted. Lost. Released. Not all broken hurts. Cracks. Paths light. Marcus search. Not love. Dominate. No longer willing. Airlight. Savannah morning. Woke. No start. Pressure. No voices, footsteps, fear, opened windows, sun caress. Deep breath, set edge, new life, own. Serena market early. Note, buttermilk biscuits, good coffee, promise, smiled, kindness, thought worth treasure, days slow healing, walked unhurried, stopped trees, sky no clock. Serena taught swim life, naps, music, cook, cry, cleansing, not easy. Discovered broken parts, stared walls remembering thorns, woke Marco's name, rage, sadness, habit, heart not unprogrammed overnight. No fear, memories, certainty, chose self, riverfront walk, miss house, thought, missed enduring woman, gave all, not itself, sold no look back bricks not worth peace. True, Marcus called, didn't answer. Voicemail cold courtesy, talk, things unclear, clear, wanted money, will control. No same woman cried threats, slept doors open, walked no back. Coffee terrace Serena, wind hair, exactly need. Sunset, wrote letter free not send, not born bad, hurt believed, love, same strength protected, wasn't, treated old furniture, burden, lock away, contempt, hard let go but, did, owe nothing, dead self, no worry, will, resolved, nothing. Leave silence, mother left, no resentment, no look back. If life shakes, remember, no money replaced living mother. Not there, not return, Thelma. Buried garden box, bury life, no carry months. Met women, fled, similar late say no. Tea, shore walks, secrets, laughed, cried, supported. Estelle Brave laughed, no just tired, not being right, not rich, famous, foundation books. Did hardest, live no guilt, dance alone, eat slow, mirror no flaws, listen, voice, trust, sleep calm, age, revolution. No wonder Marcus loved different love, begged, prison, walk light, no afraid, was mother, also woman, above all, free, chose between facility, obedience, without word, chose silence than life, sold, not revenger mind, mother's presence worth more any money, if here's name, not gave, but no longer willing lose. Thelma Price, woman, mother, now owner herself. Did you like my story? If you listened till the end, drop a 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got lots of other life stories like this on my channel, so make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one. Marcus stood by the window, arms crossed, waiting for my tears, my pleas. I gave him nothing, just stared, heart cracking. This was the boy I nursed through fevered nights, who buried his face in my robe during storms. How does a mother's love turn to ice in her child's eyes? I said nothing, words would have shattered me. He sighed, calm as a blade. I can't support you anymore, you're ruining my life. As if I were trash to be discarded. 2 days, he said on the phone. 2 days to erase me. My hands trembled over coffee, not from fear, but rage held back by love's last thread. All those years, eating scraps so he could have seconds. Sleepless, beside his wheezing chest, now worth 2 days. I knew it was coming, his glances like poison, doors slamming, his wife's polite exile, but hearing it broke something quiet inside. That night, alone, I decided, no one chooses for me again. He forgets I was a woman before his mother, that I danced in rain, loved fiercely, built this house brick by brick with calloused hands, and for hours sleep. 30 years at the bakery, every paycheck a nail, a window, a rosebush. This is mine. He forgets I didn't sleep. I remembered everything. The day I carried him home in yellow, Christmases, fights, forgiveness. Now he wanted me caged. Morning came. I cooked. He left for paperwork. I opened the wooden box, deeds, will, savings, no one knew. I smiled. The game began. I played weak, he played God, but I sold the silver, the painting, the porcelain quietly, like shedding skin. I met Serena, poured out decades of swallowed screams. She held my hand. You're not alone. She drove me out before dawn. 1 suitcase, a letter under the vase. The house is not yours. I never signed. You broke what can't be fixed. A mother's presence is worth more than money. Thelma Pricey came home to silence, called my name, found the letter, tore it, kicked the vase, screamed into empty rooms, discovered the missing deeds, the drained accounts, the sold heirlooms. For the first time, he was the one abandoned. I arrived in a quiet town with no ghosts. Serena made coffee. I laughed, traw-free, terrified. Nights were hard, nightmares of his voice. Burden old lady, bland, but morning came, and I was still here, still breathing, still mine. I sold the house. He raged when he learned too late. New walls, new family, no trace of us. He searched, called, wrote manipulative pleas. I burned them all. One sunset, I buried a letter in the garden, not for him, but for me. You were mine once. I believed you'd love me back. You didn't. I left, not in hate, but in mercy, to save the last piece of my heart. You get nothing, but I leave you this, the weight of a mother's absence. Learn, or don't. I'm done teaching. Thelma now, I dance alone. I smile at strangers. I sleep with windows open. I am old, yes, but alive. Marcus wanted me gone. I vanished, and in that vanishing, I found myself. If this moved you, drop a 1 below. Like, subscribe. Sharif. Got more stories of women who chose themselves. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one. The bakery was called Sweet Rise, a narrow storefront wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat on Carver Street, the only place in town where the smell of yeast and sugar could drown out the exhaust from the bus line. I started there at 19, fresh off the Greyhound with a suitcase and a heart still bruised from Robert's first goodbye. Mrs. Dorsey, white apron, gray bun, voice like a church bell, took one look at my cracked hands and said, "Girl, can you roll dough without crying into it?" I said yes. She hired me on the spot. 6 months later, she promoted me to counter girl because I could smile even when the morning rush left flour in my eyelashes. 2 years after that, she made me manager because I could count the till blindfolded and still know if a nickel was missing. By the time Marcus was born, I owned the place, outright paid for with overtime, with skipped lunches. With the $20 bills I tucked into a coffee can labeled Future. I opened at 4:30 a.m. every day, except Sunday. The ovens were older than I was. They hissed like angry cats until you learned their moods. I knew every dent in the stainless steel, every squeak in the floorboards. While other mothers dropped kids at daycare, I strapped Marcus into a playpen behind the prep table and let him fall asleep to the rhythm of my rolling pin. He learned to walk between sacks of flour taller than he was. His first word wasn't mama, it was cookie. The bakery fed us. Literally. When money was tight, I'd trade dialed rolls for milk at the corner store. Lemon bars for the pediatrician's copay. I kept a ledger in the back office. Every brick of the house on Maple Street logged beside every sack of sugar. $3.47 for a bag of King Arthur. $147.12 for the mortgage. Balance due, always more than I had, never more than I could carry. I worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7 when the wedding cake orders stacked up. My hands blistered, then calloused, then blistered again. I smelled like vanilla and yeast even after 2 showers. Robert would come in at closing, lean against the counter, and say, "Thelma, you're gonna turn into a croissant." I'd laugh, wipe sugar from his lip, and lock the door with the key that hung on a red ribbon around my neck. After Robert died, the bakery became sanctuary and sentence. I'd stand at the mixer at 3 a.m., tears falling into the batter, and tell myself salt only improved the flavor. Marcus, 15 and furious, stopped coming in. He said the smell made him sick. I kept the playpen in the corner anyway, folded like a relic. I hired girls who needed second chances, runaways, single moms, women with black eyes they wouldn't explain. I taught them to pipe roses, to proof dough, to look a customer in the eye and mean, "Have a nice day." Some stayed a season, some stayed years. They called me Miss T. They never knew I was learning from them. How to keep breathing when your chest felt caved in. The house on Maple Street got its final payment the same week Marcus graduated college. I closed the books that night, hands shaking worse than the day I signed the mortgage. 30 years, 1,560 weeks, 9,360 shifts. I framed the paid-off deed and hung it behind the register like a diploma. When Marcus started talking about selling, he never once mentioned the bakery. To him, it was just mom's job. A footnote. He didn't see the scar on my left thumb from the slicer, the way my shoulders rounded from carrying sheet pans, the ledger where every sacrifice had a price tag. He didn't smell the ghost of cinnamon that still clung to my skin decades later. I closed Sweet Rise the week I left town, put the key under the mat for the new Honora, young couple with a baby on the way. I left the playpen, the ledger, the framed deed. I took only the red ribbon that once held the key around my neck. It's in my suitcase now. Faded but unbroken. The ovens are cold, the counters are someone else's. But every morning in this quiet rented house, I still wake at 4:30. I tie my hair back with that ribbon, measure flour by feel, and bake a single loaf. The smell fills the rooms like a memory that refuses to die. Marcus will never understand. The house wasn't the only thing I built with these hands. I never meant to be a teacher. I just needed the help, and they needed the work. The first one was Leela, 17, belly just starting to show under her oversized t-shirt. She came in off the street asking if we had a bathroom. I pointed to the back, then watched her wash her face for 10 straight minutes. When she came out, I handed her an apron. You know how to sweep. She nodded. That was day 1. By week 2, she was piping borders on birthday cakes. By month 3, she was opening the store alone. I taught her the way Mrs. Dorsey taught me. No coddling, no praise unless it was earned. If the custard weeps, you start over. Customers don't pay for tears. But I also taught her to hide a 20 in the tip jar for emergencies and to take home the misshapen cookies so her baby wouldn't go to bed hungry. Then came Marisol, fresh out of county lockup for boosting car stereos. She had a chipped front tooth and a stare that dared you to flinch. I put her on dishes. She broke 3 bowls the first day. I didn't yell. I just said, those come out of your check. Try again. By the end of the month, she could spin sugar into cages, finer than lace. When her probation officer came sniffing, I handed him a slice of coconut cake and said, she's been here every morning at 4:30. Clock don't lie. He left without another word. Jade was different, quiet, book smart, hands that shook when she measured. Her daddy kicked her out for choosing art over Jesus. I gave her the closing shift so she could paint in the back after the ovens cooled. She designed our window displays, chalkboard menus, paper flowers, little signs that said today's special, second chances. Customers loved it. Marcus hated it, said it looked cheap. I told him the rent was paid, the health inspector was happy, and Jade was learning to price her worth. He rolled his eyes. I had rules, spoken and unspoken. You show up on time or you don't show up at all. You steal from the till. You're gone no second chances. You cry in the walk-in, not the front of house. You leave better than you came. Some lasted a week, some lasted years. They all left with something, a reference, a skill, a backbone. A few sent Christmas cards. One named her daughter Thelma. I never asked their stories unless they offered. I just gave them the same thing Mrs. Dorsey gave me, a paycheck, a purpose, and the space to prove they weren't who the world said they were. When I locked the door for the last time, I left a note taped to the mixer. To whoever comes next, teach them to measure twice, cut once. Teach them the do knows when you're angry. Teach them that a clean station is a clear mind. And when they're ready, teach them to walk out the door with their head high. That's how you pay it forward. I signed it Miss Titha, only name they ever needed. I was 19 when I walked into Sweet Rise for the first time. Suitcase in one hand, bus ticket stub in the other. Robert had left for the oil rigs up north with a promise he never kept, and I had $43 and a mouth that still tasted like goodbye. Mrs. Evelyn Dorsey stood behind the counter like she'd been poured there, 5'0", in orthopedic shoes, apron starched so stiff it could stand on its own. Her eyes were the color of burnt sugar. She didn't smile. Ever baked? No, ma'am. Ever worked? Picked cotton when I was 12. She grunted. Close enough. Wash your hands. Clock starts now. That was my interview. She didn't teach with words. She taught with motion. Watch. Do. Fix it. If the dough was slack, she'd slap my wrist with a flour-dusted hand. If the custard split, she'd make me eat it with a spoon so I'd learn what failure tastes like. When I burned a tray of rolls, she didn't scold, she just opened the back door, tossed them to the alley cats, and said, waste not, want not. Next batch is yours to sell or starve. I lived in the room above the bakery, 12 feet by 12. Slanted ceiling. One window that stuck. Rent was 2 shifts a week. I paid in sweat and silence. She taught me the language of the ovens. The top left hissed when it was happy. The bottom right ran hot compensate with a wet towel on the rack. Never opened the proof box when the light's still red. Dough needs darkness to rise. She taught me numbers. Profit margin on a dozen donuts, 42 cents. Cost of a broken bowl, 18 cents plus your pride. The value of a regular who tips in nickels but brings his sick wife a free Danish every Friday, priceless. At night she'd sit on a milk crate, smoke a Chesterfield, and quiz me like a drill sergeant. What's the bloom on yeast? Gas bubbles, ma'am. Why do we dock pie crust? So steam escapes and it don't puff like a fool. Good. Now tell me why you're still here. I never had an answer. She'd nod like I'd said something wise anyway. One morning I came down to find her asleep at the counter, head on her arms, gray bun unraveling. I started the coffee, proofed the dough, opened on time. When she woke, she looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You'll do," she said, and that was the closest she ever came to praise. When Robert's letter finally came, "I'm not coming back," I cried in the walk-in. She found me, handed me a sack of onions, chopped. Tears belong in soup. Then she stood beside me, shoulder to shoulder, until the sack was empty, and so was I. Years later, when I bought the bakery from her, with the coffee can money, she handed me the keys on that same red ribbon. "Don't thank me," she said. "Thank the girl who showed up with nothing, and stayed." I asked what she'd do now. Sleep past 4 a.m. for the first time in 50 years. She died 6 months later. I baked her funeral, cake lemon, no frosting, the way she liked it. I buried the ribbon with her. Everything I gave my apprentices, the rules, the wrist, the milk crate sermons, I stole from her. She never hugged me, she never needed to. Her faith was a heavier thing than affection. It was the weight of expectation, and I carried it like a sack of flour on my hip for the rest of my life. Mrs. Dorsey didn't raise a daughter, she raised a baker, and every dawn I tie that faded red ribbon in my hair. I still hear her voice in the hiss of the oven. Watch, do, fix it, asterisk sweet. Rise opened in 1938 on the day the bank took Mrs. Dorsey's house. She was 32, widowed by the flu, left with 2 boys and a foreclosure notice. The bank man came at noon. By 3 she was in the empty storefront on Carver Street with a sack of flour, a second-hand Hobart mixer, and a sign painted in shoe polish, bread 5, cakes 10. No electricity the first week. She baked in a coal stove she dragged in from the alley, slept on the flour sacks so the rats wouldn't chew them. Her boys, Earl, 9, Calvin, 7, rolled dough beside her until their fingers blistered. The first customer was a colored Pullman porter who paid with a silver dollar and asked for something sweet to remind me I'm still alive. She gave him a cinnamon bun still warm from the oven. He came back every layover for 20 years. By 1941, the war took her oven's metal drive and her boys' enlistment. She replaced the ovens with 2 Army surplus field ranges and kept baking. Ration cards meant ingenuity. Sugar gives sorghum, and honey butter gives bacon grease and applesauce. Eggs gives whatever the neighbor's chicken spared. She fed the whole block on Tuesdays, dialed bread for anyone who brought a bowl, called it the Lord's loaf. Never took a dime. Post-war, the neighborhood changed. White families moved to the suburbs. Black families moved in. Mrs. Dorsey didn't blink. She added cornbread to the case, learned to say yes ma'am in Gula, and hired the first colored girl in 1952, my mother's cousin, Ruth. The health inspector threatened to shut her down. She invited him to Sunday supper. He left with a peach cobbler and never wrote the citation. 1963, the mixer died. Mid-Kentucky Derby pie rush. She was 57. Arthritis blooming in her knuckles like bread dough. That's when she put the ad in the paper. Wanted, strong back, weak excuses. I answered it. She never modernized. No neon, no credit cards, no low-fat anything. But she kept the books in her head, and the door unlocked until the last tray cooled. Regulars had keys, the night shift nurse, the widowed preacher, the teenage runaway who needed a place to cry. They left money in the cigar box labeled Honor. 1977. The city tried to widen Carver Street, eminent domain. She chained herself to the mixer. The newspaper ran a photo. Tiny woman, gray bun, apron like armor, caption, local baker refuses to crumble. They rerouted the road. She never retired, just slowed. By the time I bought the place in 83, her hands shook too hard to pipe roses. But she could still taste a cake and tell you if the vanilla was imitation from 10 feet away. She died in the shop, sitting on her milk crate, cigarette burning down between her fingers. The ovens were still warm. Earl, long since back from Vietnam, found her at dawn. She'd written on the order pad in shaky pencil, "Close, when the last loaf is gone. Give the flour to the birds." We baked until the sacks were empty. Then we locked the door, left the key under the mat, and let the smell of yeast drift out into Carver Street. One final time. The building's a vape shop now, but every time the wind shifts just right, old-timers swear they still catch a ghost of cinnamon and coal smoke. Mrs. Dorsey's bakery never really closed. It just rose somewhere else. Asterisk. Sweet Rise was never just a bakery. It was the only place Mrs. Dorsey could still hear her husband breathe. He died in the winter of 36. coughing blood into a tin cup while the boys slept in the next room. The doctor said influenza. She said too much coal dust, too little hope. After the funeral, the bank came for the house on Willow Lane, 3 bedrooms, wraparound porch, the one they'd painted butter yellow, the year Earl was born. She stood on the steps with her boy's hands in hers and watched the sheriff nail the notice to the door. That night, she packed 1 suitcase, 2 castor and skillets, and the wedding quilt her mother pieced from feed sacks. She didn't cry until the boys were asleep. Then she pressed her face into the quilt and screamed so hard the stitches split. Carver Street was all she could afford. The storefront had been a shoe repair, then a numbers joint, then empty for 3 years. The windows were cracked, the floor warped, the oven a rusted relic from a failed diner. She paid the first month's rent with her husband's pocket watch, the one that still ticked even after his heart stopped. The landlord laughed. She didn't. She baked her first loaf at 3 a.m. with a kerosene lamp and tears that salted the dough. When the crust cracked open like a sunrise, she whispered to the empty room, "See, Henry, we're still here." She never said his name again in daylight, but every morning she set an extra roll on the sill, always the misshapen one, and left it for the sparrows. The birds learned her grief before the neighbors did. The boys grew thin and quiet. Earl stopped speaking for a month after the move. Calvin wet the bed until he was 10. She fed them on burnt sugar and promises. "One day we'll have a porch again." She said it while scrubbing floors at the white folks' houses after closing, while her fingers bled from lye, while the war took her ovens and her children. She said it until her voice cracked like overproofed dough. When the letter came, Earl's ship sunk off Guadalcanal. She didn't open it in the shop. She walked to the river, sat on the bank where the willows dragged their fingers in the water, and read it alone. Then she folded it into a paper boat and set it afloat. The current took it under the bridge and out of sight. She went back to work with flour on her cheeks like war paint. Calvin came home missing an arm and most of his laugh. He sat in the corner and whittled dough scraps into tiny soldiers. She let him. Some nights she found him asleep with his head on the prep table, the wooden arm cradled like a baby. She covered him with her apron and kept mixing. She never remarried. Said once, Henry took the soft parts with him. Bushy kept his shaving brush in the drawer by the register, bristles worn to nubs. Every Christmas Eve she lathered it with whipped cream and let the boys shave the gingerbread men. They laughed until their ribs hurt. She laughed until she didn't. The day the city came for the street, she was 71. The surveyor was young, nervous, clutching forms like a shield. She chained herself to the Hobart with the same padlock she'd used on the coal stove in 38. "Over my cold body," she told him. The photographer caught the moment. Her eyes, burnt sugar, unblinking, met the lens. The picture ran above the fold. Underneath, in her spidery asterisk, "Sweet Rise opened in the dark of a March morning in 1938. The air so cold it bit the lungs like broken glass." Mrs. Dorsey kicked the warped door shut behind her. The hinges screamed like a stepped-on cat. Inside, the storefront reeked of old leather, mildew, and the ghost of moonshine spilled years before. She lit a kerosene lamp. The flame hissed blue, throwing shadows that crawled up the cracked plaster like ivy. She set the wedding quilt on the floorboards, faded feedsack squares, still smelling faintly of Henry's pipe tobacco and the lye soap she'd used to scrub his shirts. The quilt became her bed for the first month, folded beneath the prep table, where the mice skittered at night. She woke to their tiny claws clicking across tin, the sound sharp as thrown gravel. The coal stove she dragged in from the alley was black with soot, its belly scarred from 1,000 forgotten fires. She fed it lump coal that clinked like bones, the heat blooming orange and angry. Dough went in raw and pale, came out blistered gold, the crust crackling like thin ice underfoot. Steam curled up in sweet, yeasty ghosts, carrying vanilla so pure it stung the eyes. Her first loaf split open with a sigh, releasing a breath of sourdough temps that tasted of earth and desperation. She broke it apart with bare hands. The crumb was tight, the crust sharp enough to draw blood from her lip when she bit down. "Still here, Henry," she whispered to the empty room, voice raw from coal, smoke, and unshed tears. The boy slept on flour sacks that rustled like dry leaves. Earl's hair smelled of yeast and little boy's sweat. Calvin's breath came in small, hiccuping sobs, even in dreams. She tucked the quilt around them, the fabric stiff with spilled milk and dried sugar. Every dawn she pressed her face into Henry's shaving brush bristles, soft as rabbit fur, still holding the ghost of bay rum before tying on her apron. The apron was starched until it crackled, the strings cutting into her waist like wire. Ration days, The air thickened with sorghum's dark molasses bite. She rendered bacon grease until it shimmered gold in the skillet, the smoke curling blue, and pork's applesauce from Windfall's tart, cinnamon-flecked, stretched the butter. Eggs came warm from under hens, still feathered and speckled with blood. She cracked them one-handed, the yolks sliding thick as sunlight into the bowl. The mixer, a second-hand Hobart, with a cough like a dying man, whirred and clanked, flinging flecks of dough that dried white on her forearms. When the letter about Earl arrived, the river smelled of mud and rotting willow. She sat on the bank, boots sinking into silt that sucked like grief. The paper was cheap, onion skin thin, the ink already bleeding in the damp. She folded it into a boat, the creases sharp as knife cuts, and set it on water the color of weak tea. It floated 3 feet before the current dragged it under with a soft, swallowing gulp. Calvin came home minus an arm, the stump wrapped in gauze that smelled of iodine and train smoke. He whittled dough scraps with his pocket knife. The curls fell like pale wood shavings, smelling faintly of yeast and the metallic temps of his phantom limb. Some nights the ovens cooled with a metallic tink-tink-tink, the sound of a heart slowing. She covered him with her apron, still warm from her body, still dusted with flour, and listened to the mice resume their midnight dance. The day the city came, the air was thick with diesel and hot tar. The surveyor's clipboard smelled of fresh mimeograph ink. She chained herself to the Hobart with the same padlock that once secured the coal stove. The metal was cold, biting into her wrist like a promise. The camera flash popped white, freezing her eyes, burnt sugar, unblinking, and the flour on her cheeks like war paint. The photograph smelled of burnt magnesium for days. Her last morning. The shop was quiet except for the tick of cooling sheet pans and the soft plop of dough settling in the proof box. She sat on the milk crate, cigarette ash lengthening like a gray tongue. The order pad page curled at the edges. Ink still wet. Tell Thelma the dough knows. Her name now. The words smelled of vanilla and finality. We baked until the last sack sighed empty. The flour dust hanging in the air like a veil. The final loaf came out lopsided. The crust blistered and singing. I broke it open. Steam rose in a final, fragrant ghost. The sparrows waited on the sill, wings fluttering like torn paper. I set the misshapen roll on the ledge. It cooled quickly in the March wind. The scent of yeast and coal smoke drifting out into Carver Street one last time. The building is gone. The street is smooth, but when the wind shifts sharp, sudden, carrying the bite of coming winter, you can still taste it on the back of your tongue. Coal heat, sorghum, the faint metallic temps of a heart that refused to stop rising. Sweet, rise cracked open on a March dawn so bitter the air tasted metallic, like licking a frozen nail. Mrs. Dorsey shouldered the warped door. It shrieked on hinges rusted the color of dried blood. Inside, the room stank of wet leather, mouse piss, and the sour ghost of corn liquor soaked into floorboards. She struck a match. The kerosene lamp coughed blue flame, spitting a bead of oil that hissed on the cold tin counter. Shadows jittered across walls, blistered with peeling green paint, each flake curling like a dead moth. She unrolled Henry's wedding quilt faded feed sack squares, still holding the ghost smoke of his pipe and the sharp bite of lye soap. It became her mattress, laid over flour sacks that crackled like autumn leaves under her weight. Mice skittered across the tin ceiling at night, claws ticking sharp as thrown dice. She woke with flour dust in her eyelashes and the sour milk smell of little boys' dreams clinging to her skin. The coal stove, dragged in from the alley, its belly scarred black and flaking devoured lump coal that clinked like knuckles. She fed it until the iron glowed dull red, heat rolling out in waves that smelled of scorched earth and distant lightning. Dough went in pale and shivering, came out blistered bronze, the crust snapping like thin ice under a boot heel. Steam burst upward in a hot, yeasty sigh, thick with vanilla so pure it burned the back of the throat and made the eyes water like onions. She tore the first loaf with bare hands. The crumb was tight, springy, tasting of sourdough's sour kiss and the faint iron of her own cracked lip. Still here, Henry, she rasped, voice raw from coal smoke and swallowed screams. Earl's hair carried the yeasty funk of rising dough and the salt of unwashed fear. Calvin's breath hitched in small, wet sobs, even in sleep. She tucked the quilt around them, fabrics stiff with spilled milk, crystallized sugar, and the ghost of Henry's Barham shaving soap. Every dawn, she pressed her face into his shaving brush, bristles worn velvet soft, still holding the sting of rum and the faint copper of his last cut before knotting her apron. The starched cotton crackled like fresh snow. The strings bit into her waist. leaving red welts that throbbed in time with her pulse. Ration days. Sorghum poured slow and dark as creek mud, its molasses bite coating the tongue. Bacon grease rendered until it shimmered liquid gold, spitting tiny fireworks that smelled of pork and Sunday sign. Windfall apples tart, worm-bitten, cooked down with cinnamon until the air thickened to syrup, steam fogging the windows into blind white mirrors. Eggs came warm from under hens, shells freckled with blood and down. She cracked them one-handed, yolks sliding thick as melted butter, the faint sulfur pop stinging the nose, the Hobart mixer second-hand, coughing like a consumptive word, and clanked, flinging dough flecks that dried 2 white scabs on her forearms. The scent of yeast bloomed wild, almost feral, until the whole shop smelled like a living lung. Earl's letter arrived on paper thin as onion skin, ink already bleeding in the river damp. She sat on the bank where willows trailed green fingers through water the color of weak tea and mud. The envelope smelled of gunpowder and salt. She folded it into a boat, creases sharp as paper cuts, and set it afloat. It bobbed once, twice, then the current sucked it under with a soft, swallowing gluck. Calvin came home minus an arm, the stump wrapped in gauze, reeking of iodine, train smoke, and the sweet rot of gangrene barely missed. He whittled dough scraps with a puck. The curls fell pale and damp, smelling of raw yeast and the phantom ache of missing bone. The ovens cooled with a metallic tink-tink-tink, like a clock running down. She draped her apron over him, still warm from her body, dusted with flour and the faint vanilla of her skin, and listened to the mice resume their midnight tap dance across the tin. The day the city came, diesel fumes hung thick as velvet. The surveyor's clipboard smelled of fresh mimeograph ink and nervous sweat. She chained herself to the Hobart with the same padlock that once locked the coal stove. The metal was ice cold, biting her wrist until blood beaded dark and sticky. The camera flash popped magnesium white, freezing her eyes, burnt sugar, unblinking, and the flour on her cheeks like war paint. The photograph reeked of burnt powder for days. Her final morning. The shop was hushed except for the soft plop-plop of dough settling in the proof box and the slow tick of cooling sheet pans. She sat on the milk crate, cigarette ash lengthening like a gray tongue. The order pad page curled at the edges, ink still wet and smelling of vanilla and finality. Tell Thelma the dough knows her name now. We baked until the last sack sighed empty, flour dust hanging in the air like a bridal veil. The final loaf came out lopsided, the crust blistered and singing, steam rising in a hot, fragrant ghost. I broke it open. The crumb was springy, tasting of sourdough and coal smoke, and every